A couple of weeks ago, I discussed the story of Love Canal, but I found it while researching a much more known topic that shares similar fates. They're both stories of deception that put everyone in harm's way for the benefit of a chemical company, and in this case, one man's bank account. After a few requests, I've circled back to my original topic of interest, and today I bring you the tragic tale of Times Beach, Missouri. The town of Times Beach was located on Route 66, established in 1925 as part of a newspaper promotion. The now-defunct St. Louis Star-Times offered a 6-month subscription for buyers of a plot of land, costing them $67.50. It was marketed as an escape for city folk, but the residents who ended up moving in after the Depression and World War II ended up being of lower middle class instead of the wealthy community it was promised to become. It became home for roughly 1,200 residents by 1970, offering them a tight-knit small-town community life that they were comfortable with. They could picnic, fish, everyone knew everyone, and generally their little town was considered a safe place to live. The introduction of one man would change how safe they really were. One of the most obvious problems in Times Beach, due to unpaved roads and picking up wind, was a large amount of dust that seemed to always be present. The only man who seemed to know how to control the dust was one Russell Martin Bliss, who was spraying his horse arena and farm with some kind of oily substance that seemed to do the trick. The method was impressive to the residents of Times Beach, and soon they'd be hiring Bliss to spray what he said was just motor oil across their properties. Now, what was really in the problem-solving solution? From 1970 to 1972, the Northeastern Pharmaceutical and Chemical Company, Incorporated, or NEPACO, was busy with the production of hexachlorophenol, an antibacterial agent used in soap, toothpaste, and common household disinfectants. It fell into disuse after being tied to dozens of deaths in the US and France. Unfortunately, the substance produced a byproduct known as dioxin, an extremely toxic compound. At the time, incineration was the best method to destroy such a compound, but it was an expensive method, and NEPACO was interested in finding an alternative to getting rid of the waste. NEPACO contracted the services to the Independent Petrochemical Corporation, or IPC, who charged them $3,000 a load to take the waste, then paid Russell Bliss, who owned a small oil waste business, $125 per load to get rid of it. Bliss collected roughly 18,200 gallons of the toxic dioxin and brought it to his storage facility where it was unloaded and mixed into tanks of oil. This oil was sold to a fuel company, an oil refining company, and mixed into Bliss's own personal miracle dust suppressant, the same one he was now spraying all over the land. The first case of contamination came in 1971. Bliss had been hired to spray a horse arena, and soon after, birds started falling dead from the barn rafters. Soon after, the horses started looking sickly, missing patches of hair and refusing to eat. It wasn't long before 62 horses became ill, and they had to be put down. The owners accused Bliss of poisoning their land, but he assured them that he had only used motor oil, and that if it was toxic, he wouldn't have used it on his own land. A month after that spraying, Bliss continued his work at the Timberline Stables near Jefferson City. 12 horses died, and children exposed to the spraying were diagnosed with chloracne, an acne-like eruption associated with dioxin poisoning. Suspicious of the work Bliss had done, owners of the stables removed the top layer of soil from their property. A third location had also been contaminated, Bubbling Springs Ranch near St. Louis. So the owners removed the top layer of soil, but instead of disposing of it, they just moved it to some home properties. 1972 is where the story turns from grim to disaster, when Bliss set his sights for Times Beach. He was hired to spray his contaminated oil over 23 miles of dirt roads. They couldn't afford to pave the roads, so this was the solution they thought they needed to tamper down the dust problem. Bliss sprayed 180 gallons of waste oil in Times Beach over the course of 4 years. It wasn't until 1982 when a leaked EPA document was discovered listing Times Beach as the highest-ranked site contaminated with dioxin. Residents felt betrayed, criticizing the EPA for not telling them that they were living on toxic land. Pressure from the media and residents brought the EPA in to test the land officially, but a day later, the worst flood in the town's history came and demolished homes. Some residents had to escape by boat. When the results came back, the EPA could no longer ignore the contaminated town. So around Christmas 1982, Superfund announced a plan to buy the town from its 900 property owners at $36.7 million. Some residents felt cheated, since the price was set per square footage and they had paid more for their homes than was offered. As a result, some chose to stay, living on quarantined land that required guests to pass through a gate and sign release forms to get to. The consequences of staying back made residents of Times Beach a hazard to others. Fear of contamination kept some residents from relocating to nearby towns, claiming they were not welcoming any Times Beach trash. Teachers would quarantine former Times Beach students in certain parts of the classrooms, and dry cleaners refused their business. People who'd once lived on toxic land weren't free once they left, for the anxiety that they might be sick followed them for the rest of their lives. They feared they might be carrying contaminants and spreading it to other people, a burden that must weigh heavy on anyone's mind. The remainder of Times Beach homes were bought off in the 90s. The EPA constructed a massive incinerator at the expense of Syntex, the company where the dioxin came from. Operated by 300 workers, they burned the dioxin in the soil and deconstructed homes that were then buried. Russell Bliss never had to pay for the damage he caused. He claimed that he was unaware of the dioxin in his oil, and the whole ordeal just had him turn his business over to his son, who is now being denied his requests for hauling permits of hazardous waste in Missouri. He says he shouldn't be penalized for the actions of his father. The damage here doesn't end just because people left the town. Some of the residents won't feel safe for the rest of their lives, and nobody really had to pay for it. It's a tale of injustice that slips through the cracks even today, brought on by money and greed. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing for more stories are on the way. And if you want, you can follow me on Twitter and Twitch, even though I'm only there once in a blue moon. I hope to see you there anyway. Until next time, be well.